Hey guys, Phil here, hope you're all well. What you're looking at in front of you is my Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES, and my Super Wildcard DX2 SNES copier. Now there's nothing wrong with both of these, they're perfectly working, but there's a problem with something I purchased the other day, and that's the SCART Lead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the problem is and then fix it. So if you stick around, I'll crack on with that. So the SCART Lead I purchased off eBay is a SYNC-on-LUMA SCART Lead for the SNES. It's plugged in, you can see it here. And it's working perfectly fine. However, there is an issue with it that needs to be fixed. What I'm going to do is show you the image that's coming from the SNES and through the SCART, and it looks perfectly fine, but yeah, there's something wrong with it. I can notice it straight away. Now the reason I know there's something wrong with this is I've had my Super Wildcard DX2 since around about 98ish. So I know how this menu should look, and when I was using my EverDrive on this thing I didn't notice it, but it wasn't until I plugged in my Super Wildcard DX2 and got to this menu that I saw there was an issue, because like I said, I've had this thing since 98ish, so I know what this menu should look like. I'm going to point out what the issue is. To me, that image looks overdriven. It's too bright. And if we take a look at the CD icon square just here we're missing some information. There should be more colours that are in that square icon. Now that's telling me that this image is being overdriven, and I pretty much verified what the problem is. What I'm going to do now, guys, is load 240p test suit, and then I can show you how the RGB colours are being overdriven. So I'm just going to load that on my Super Wildcard DX2, and then I'll come back and show you the colour gradients. So I've gone ahead and loaded 240p test suit. What I'm going to do now is go to the gradient pattern. We're going to go to color bars and we'll take a look. Now I don't know whether it's coming over on camera. What I'll try and do is I'll try and capture this with my Elgato. But if you look here, if we look at the red, green and blue, there is no gradient after the C. It's just the same colour on the colour bars, and that's not a good sign. We should get gradient right the way up to F, but from C onwards we're not getting any gradients, and that tells me that the RGB is being overdriven. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is I'm going to bust open the head of the SCART and I'm going to show you what the problem is. So what I've done now is I busted open the head of the SCART, and I can see straight away there's no termination on the red, green and blue. So here's the red, this one here. This middle one's the green and this one's the blue, and you can see there should be termination resistors on each of those colours, and you can clearly see whoever wired this, yeah, they didn't do that. I don't know why that is. So yeah, whoever wired this didn't do a very good job. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hook up my scope to one of the colours and we'll take a look at see what sort of peak-to-peak voltage is at, because the peak-to-peak voltage should be 0 to 0.7 volts, where 0 is no colour and 0.7 is maximum intensity of that colour. So yeah, this thing's not wired correctly, guys, so I'm just going to hook up my scope and we'll take a look at the colours. Let me show you what I've done, guys. So I've got 240p test suit going on this SNES. I'm generating a maximum intensity red thanks to 240p test suit, and if you take a look on the SCART, I'm probing the red input on the SCART, and if we take a look at my oscilloscope, I'll explain what's going on here. So each square you see is one line of video being drawn on the TV screen. Now you can clearly see we're going from 0 to 1 volt, right? So 0 here is no colour, and 1 volt here is maximum intensity of red, and that's what you're seeing represented on my scope. Now the problem is, we take a look, the peak to peak voltage is around 1 volt. That is too high for the TV. It needs to be 0.7 volts. So that red there is being overdriven, and we can see that on the scope because it should be peak to peak 0.7 volts. So yeah, what I'm going to do now, guys, is explain why our gradient is all messed up. What I want to start off doing, guys, is showing you a good signal, what a good signal should look like. So what I've done is I've taken the red, the green and the blue, and obviously when you combine them together you get white. And what you're seeing here, if I just show you the red, but it's the same for the other colours as well, if we could take a full TV screen and gradiate it from 0 to F region, so a full TV screen of red, and obviously that, like I said, this will be the same for the green and the blue. Now on a good signal should be 0 volts, maximum 0.7 volts. So what that basically means is here should be black or close to black, here should be maximum intensity of the colour. Now what you're looking at here on this yellow trace is, this is what you would see on an oscilloscope if you was looking at a single line being drawn across the TV screen. All an oscilloscope is measuring voltage over time. So if we take a look at it, we start off here, we've got little to no colour, then we go up a gradient, and this is what this is showing on the scope. Obviously we go up a little bit in voltage and we get a next step up in gradients, then we go up again and we get next step up in gradients, and so on and so on and so on until we get to maximum voltage, which is 0.7 volts and maximum intensity of that colour. There it is, guys, that's 0 volts down here, this is 0.7 volts here, maximum intensity, and each time we go up we get a gradient drawn across the TV screen. Now what you've got to remember, this is what you would see on an oscilloscope, this is not what you would see across the TV screen. Obviously a single line is just a flat line, you won't see this jagged stir effect that's going on. All an oscilloscope is measuring voltage over time. But all this is just depicting is each time we go up in voltage, we get a different gradients. Right, that's all you need to remember. So what I'm going to show you now is what we've got wrong with our image. Now I've shown you what a good signal looks like, let me explain what's happening with our bad signal. And it's pretty clear once you know what's happening. Again, we've got our gradient across the TV screen, full screen gradients. It doesn't matter which color we pick, it's just the same. Here's our ramp again as we go up in gradients. On the oscilloscope we see that change because all an oscilloscope is measuring voltage over time, and this is what's happening as the lines being drawn across the TV screen. We go up in voltage, we go up in voltage, we go up in voltage, and each time we go up in voltage our gradients changes. Now if we take a look, remember when I told you 0 volts is basically black or close to black, and 0.7 is maximum intensity. Well, remember our voltage that we measured on the oscilloscope was 1 volt peak to peak instead of 0.7 volts peak to peak. If we take a look, what the TV is interpreting, once this 0.7 volts is reached, it's interpreting this here as maximum intensity. So anything above this is just gone. Any color in this region that's in one of these gradients is just seen as maximum intensity, and that's why from C onwards the gradients looks the same. It's because we've reached our maximum here, and obviously we're pushing way beyond that maximum to 1 volt. So anything above C is just gone. Any color that's in this D region, E region, F region is just being pushed over the maximum intensity, and therefore the TV just sees that as maximum intensity, and therefore anything here has just been washed out. And that's the same for the green, it's the same with the blue, and obviously when you get to white and they're combined, the same again. Anything in these regions with these colors here are just being pushed over maximum intensity, and that's why the gradients looks wrong on our TV. It's because instead of it being from 0 to 0.7 volts peak to peak, it's 0 to 1 volt peak to peak. And obviously anything in this region and this region and this region and this region just gets seen as maximum intensity, and that's why our gradient looks so bad. Now what we've got to do is we've got to take this 0 to 1 volt peak to peak and get it down to 0 to 0.7 volts peak to peak, and then we'll have our nice gradients back, because obviously like I said, 0 to 0.7 is the max we can go. Anything over that just gets washed out. So yeah, we need to take this signal down to 0.7 volts peak to peak. So how are we going to fix this? Well, it's quite simple actually. All we need to do is put a resistor in line with each RGB signal, and that will help us attenuate the signal down from 1 volt peak to peak to 0.7 volts peak to peak. Now you may be going, well, how do we do that? Now we get a little bit of help from the TV, and the reason we get help from the TV is inside the TV on each of the R, G and B lines there is a 75 ohm resistor to ground, and when we put a resistor in line with the R, G and B on each signal, that creates a voltage divider that helps us drop that higher voltage down to a smaller voltage that the TV is going to accept, and that's called attenuation. And I'm going to show you that 75 ohm resistor inside the TV. What I've done is I've got myself a SCART head and I've removed most of the pins, and all I'm probing now is the blue input and ground, and I'm going to show you that 75 ohm resistor to ground, and there it is right there on my multimeter. Now that's not just on the blue input, that's for the red, green and blue input. We have that 75 ohm resistor to ground that allows us to attenuate the signal. We create a voltage divider, but it's not just the R, G and B inputs, it's also on the composite video input, well, what we use for sync basically if you're using RGB. So I'll show you that next. Same again guys, but this time I'm probing the composite video input, and if we take a look, there's our 75 ohm resistor to ground. Now pretty much every video signal that goes into the SCART has a 75 ohm resistor to ground, and it helps us attenuate signals. So what I'm going to do now is I need to work out what resistor we need on the RGB inputs. What we need to do now is a little bit of maths, because we need to find out what our termination resistor is going to be, and we've pretty much got everything we need to know. We know the input of each RGB is 1 volt peak to peak. We know we want to get an attenuation round about 0.7 volts peak to peak. We already know R2, which is 75 ohms. That's the resistor inside the TV. We need to find out what R1 is, the one that we're going to put in series with each RGB signal. Now, I've already worked it out, guys. If we take a 32.1 ohm resistor and terminate each RGB line with that, we will attenuate the signal down to 0.7 volts. Now the closest I've got is 33 ohms, which will be really nice. So if I put a 33 ohm resistor in series with each RGB input, I'll get a nice attenuation of 0.7 volts, and that's perfect for the TV, because you need to remember 0 volts down here is black and 0.7 volts is max, and that's all you need to know. And if you go over 0.7 volts, that's when you start overdriving the video. So I'm going to get a 33 ohm resistor on each of those RGB lines, and we should be golden. And as you can see, I've got 3 33 ohm resistors, one for each R, G and B signal. So I'll get those soldered onto the head of the SCART and then come back. Let's take a look at what that red signal looks like on the oscilloscope. Again, I'm probing the red input, and if we take a look at the signal on my scope, that looks really nice to me. If you take a look, we're bouncing round about the 0.7 volt that we need. Obviously remember, down here is 0, which is no colour. Up here is maximum colour, and you can see maximum is bouncing around about 0.7 volts, which is pretty much nuts on for the RGB signals. So yeah, I would say those 3 signals are really nice now. And that's the SCART lead all ready to go back in its head. You can see the RGB is now attenuated. And yeah, something that's puzzling me, guys, is I don't know why someone wouldn't terminate those resistors on the SCART head, because if you look at pretty much every single PAL SNES diagram for RGB SCART, each of the red, green and blue are terminated. I think they terminated with 75 ohm resistors, but I've proven that that's a little bit too high. But yeah, I don't know why someone wouldn't terminate the RGB signals, because they need to be terminated. I've shown that in this video. So it's just a bit weird why someone would do that. The only thing I can think is, have they tried it without the RGB resistors and they've looked at the image on screen and gone, wow, that picture's brighter, and therefore they've associated brightness with a better picture, which is not always the case, and you can see I've shown in this video why that's not correct. And that's the only thing I can think of why someone would do this. It just doesn't make sense. What I might do is contact the person I bought this SCART from on eBay and let them know, but I don't know if they're the manufacturer of this SCART. So yeah, I'll just pass that information on to them, because technically they're selling that doesn't work properly, right? I'm not going to name and shame them, but yeah, they need to sort their out, guys. And we're all back together and powered on. Let's take a look at the Super Wildcard DX2 menu, and I can tell you straight away that's how I remember it from back in the day. And if we take a look at the CD icon, you can see we've got some detail back in those brighter areas. So yeah, there you go guys. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff. And as always, I'll catch you on the next one. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Guys, this was a copier from back in the day. This is what the overdrive is. Proper old school. Catch you next time, guys.